All right, well, good morning. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Maggie Emery. I'm the Interim Executive Director of Protect Minnesota. Protect Minnesota was founded in 1991 as a coalition of 16 statewide groups here in Minnesota committed to working together to prevent gun violence in our state. Now we are the only state-based, statewide gun violence prevention organization working in Minnesota. Minnesota is at a crossroads right now when it comes to preventing gun violence in our state. Today, I'm very proud to be joined by voices from across the state who are demanding action on this issue. There are 6 more weeks left in the legislative session. In the week since the legislature went on recess, there were 8 mass shootings in the United States. How many mass shootings will there be? How many shootings will there be in the next 6 weeks of session? How many shootings do there need to be before action is taken on this issue by our legislature? In 2021, 570 Minnesotans lost their lives to gun violence. That's 570 preventable deaths. That's 570 families who are just in 1 year left wondering why, mourning a loss, missing someone they will never get back. Gun violence in every corner of our state is causing more and more people to stand up and fight for change. Of those 570 gun deaths in 2021, almost 70% of them were suicides, and the vast majority of those happened in greater Minnesota. You are not immune to gun violence, no matter who you are or where you live. In our state, it's something that impacts all of us. But we don't have to sit helpless on the sidelines as these tragedies happen in our state. We can pass this legislative session common sense legislation that has been proven to work in other places that will be effective here. Extremist protection orders, universal background checks, and funding for community violence intervention represents the baseline of where we should be in our state. It represents life-saving legislation that is widely popular and evidence-based and the right thing to do. We're pleased to see that these important bills are moving through the Minnesota legislature, but now is not the time to stop. This year, we can come together to pass common sense reforms that will make a difference. Next, I'm proud to introduce Sasha Cotton, who's the Senior Strategy Director at the National Network for Safe Communities and former Director at the Minneapolis Office of Violence Prevention in the Minneapolis Health Department. Thanks for joining us.
Well, good morning, everybody. As Maggie said, I'm Sasha Cotton with the National Network for Safe Communities at John Jay College and the former director of the Minneapolis Office of Violence Prevention and a continued resident of the state of Minnesota. I come to you today, yes, with those professional hats and as a public health professional, but more importantly, as a mother and a grandmother and a resident of this state. And also someone who, quite frankly, was supposed to be in Louisville yesterday. Due to unforeseen circumstances, I was not able to travel, but my team is there and was impacted by the mass shooting that Louisville experienced because I am working at the national level now. My team is also working in Nashville, where we saw the recent school shooting. How many more lives have to be lost across our country before state by state we recognize the need for comprehensive gun reform and the implementation of the measures that we know are required to keep our communities and our children safe? I dropped my grandson off at school this morning, and I am scared every day that he will not be safe in his school building because guns will be entered into that building and could take his life or the life of his colleagues or his classmates, the life of his teachers. We can do this, Minnesota. We can pass this reform to make our kids safe, because if we don't, we are begging to be next. We don't want to be the next Louisville. We don't want to be the next Nashville. Let's do what we know needs to happen, pass this reform so that Minnesota students, children, and families can be safe. Thank you. At this time, I will turn it over to Kiwanis Valea.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Kiwanis Valea, and I work with Metro Youth Diversion. And Metro Youth Diversion is an organization that's out there on a daily basis with our boots on the ground, helping to prevent such as shootings and violence and to guns, knives, or anything else that prevails. So we also learn how to engage with help people with individuals with substance use disorder, which leads to violence and things like that. So on a daily basis, from Wednesday to Sunday, we're out there from 3 in the afternoon to 8 at night or 9 at night, And we out there trying to do our best to prevent other individuals to go through the things that I went through. See, I suffer from grief myself. My 13-year-old child was murdered coming from school, shot 3 times in the chest and just put on the porch. And I'm also a single father of 2 boys that's 8 and 9 years old. And when I'm sitting at the table and they telling me, and I ask them, who do you want to be when you grow up? And they look me in my eyes and say, Daddy, I want to be you. That's the reason why it's so important to pass this bill for CVI for individuals like myself and other organizations can get out and put their boots on the ground and put their heart, sweat, and soul into saving other parents' lives. Because dealing with grief is real hard. When my kid's birthday come up, I got to think about him. When Christmas come up, I got to think about him. When I'm looking at my 2 kids and dropping them off at school and battling with them on a daily basis, I just think about if they going to come home safe, am I going to go home to pick up my kids? And that's one of the main reasons why I get out there on the streets and do what I do on a daily basis. From this time, I am going to introduce Dr. Thomas Kottke.
Thanks much. I'm Tom Kottke. I'm a cardiologist. I'm medical director for Wellbeing at Health Partner, and I also serve on the board of Protect Minnesota. I grew up in South Minneapolis, attended Kenwood School, Jefferson Junior High, West High School. Now I live in St. Paul. These facts are important because my first encounter with gun violence and suicide was the death of my classmate, Eddie Holt, when we were approximately 20 years old. Eddie lived a street over. I met him in kindergarten. My first memory of Eddie was we got busted for throwing a teddy bear across the room and playing catch with it. Teacher didn't like that so much. You know, we got scolded. And my next memory was in the garage of his parents' house, and he was showing me a revolver that he had found underneath a pile of clothes or a pile of something. Okay. The third memory of Eddie was looking at him in his coffin with a bandage wrapped around his head that apparently was hiding what was left of the back of his skull when he had shot himself. A few years ago, Michael Trangle and I, Michael was a psychiatrist at Health Partners, examined the records of Health Partners patients who had died by suicide. 85% died by a gunshot. Half of the patients had neither an insurance claim nor a visit for a psychosocial condition. These suicides were totally unexpected from our perspective. In 2004, the violence of suicide by firearm entered my personal life once again when a close friend of my wife's family died by self-harm of a firearm. Both my father-in-law and this friend, Dr. Jack Mischenfelder, were anesthesiologists at the Mayo Clinic, Rochester. I and my family were totally unprepared for the suicide of Jack's death. The third episode that affected me was the suicide of a Park Nicollet patient who had been treated for depression. He was doing better. He had never talked about violence. He had never mentioned his guns. He went home. One night he murdered his family, his entire family, and then died by his own hand. I don't have the data, but it appears to me that murder-suicide is becoming more frequent. Murder-suicide, like the last 2 events. How can a mass shooter episode be considered anything else? To say that death by suicide using a firearm is not gun violence is absurd. Suicide by firearm affects not only the individual who dies, their family, and the entire community of their friends. A suicide gesture is usually an impulsive act that, if it is not completed, is not repeated. And extreme risk protection orders give us the opportunity to intervene and interrupt. At this time, it's essential that we pass extreme risk protection orders, background checks, and criminal violence interruption bills. So thank you, and I'll turn it over to our Attorney General, Keith Ellison.
Thank you, Dr. Kottke.
Thank you.
I just want to thank our entire Gun Violence Prevention Coalition. And I think the value of this group of speakers you've heard today is that they come from every walk of life. Teenagers sorting out what should be a fistfight with guns, with deadly results. A beloved friend who is in a fit of anxiety and depression takes their life. Suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. We can intervene. We can help you through this. We can do it, but we need the time. And if you can just get a gun like that, we don't have the time. On a national scale, Minnesota, as special as it is to each one of us, we're kind of not that special when it comes to the epidemic of gun violence throughout the country. We've got to do something about it. And so we have an urgent message, 6 more weeks, prioritize gun violence prevention laws now. 6 more weeks, save some lives now. 6 more weeks, make sure that we have the people who can go out in the community and relate to folks as a peer, like what Q was talking about, to talk to people and talk the violence down. That's what the community violence interrupters are all about. Preventing gun violence, saying we don't have to settle it this way. What's your problem? What's your problem? Let's talk about this. Let's not shoot it out. Let's talk it out. 6 more weeks to get some good red flag laws in here, which protect so many people who are in crisis, particularly violence against women. And of course, background checks. Why not some background checks? And let me just tell you, I've been practicing 30 years, and I've studied the Bruin decision, and I'm even fighting and appealing this most recent decision involving young people who are allowed to now have carry. We'll see how that works out, but we are fighting it, we are appealing it. And I'm telling you that I think that even though I vehemently disagree with where the Supreme Court is now on gun law, gun jurisprudence, there's still plenty of room to legislate to protect people's lives. We are not barred. There is space. Now, is the Supreme Court wrong on Bruin? Yes. Were they wrong on Heller? Yes. But you know what? Even with those decisions, leave enough space for our legislature to act now if they will act now. And we're asking for bipartisan support.
Yes.
Right here, right now, I am saying that we need our Republican colleagues to join with us to prevent life. Yes. Nothing about a red flag law interferes with your right to the Second Amendment. Nothing about community violence interrupters interferes with your right to the Second Amendment. Nothing involving a background check interferes with your right to use your Second Amendment rights. We can do this in a bipartisan way. We can save lives, but we only got 6 weeks to do it. We cannot mess around. There are a lot of competing possibilities, a lot of competing priorities, and I know that. But what could be more of a priority than saving Minnesotans' lives right here, right now? Let's get these laws passed. Thank you.
All right, we have a few minutes to take questions from reporters if anyone has a question.
What's the status in the Senate in terms of conversations you've had with some of the understanding going into recess where there were some Democratic members who had concerns with some of these bills, but has anything changed over recess? Where do things stand?
Yeah, our understanding is that it's our job to find the votes for these bills. These bills are popular, these bills are effective, voting for these bills is the right thing to do. It's our job to get the votes for these bills that will save lives, and we believe that we're going to do it.
Do you have enough, though, as to her point?
We know that it's our job to get enough.
Can I answer that? So look, so I've been doing politics for at least 20 years now. And so I remember when I was new at this, I'm not new at it anymore. And I'm telling you, the chances of whether you can pass a bill are completely determined by how hard you're willing to fight to pass that bill. So you look at it, at one point it's like, oh, maybe we don't have the votes. But you start whipping the votes, you start talking to folks, you get constituents to call their representatives. Next thing you know, you pass the bill. So I understand why my dear friends in the journalism world always ask, what are the odds? Well, the odds vary based on our effort, and we are absolutely determined. Am I right? Are we?
Right.
Are we? Are we? So we're going to pass that bill.
Do you think standalone or
I think odds are in the public safety omnibus. Odds are, but I can't say definitively.
Can someone speak to perhaps Attorney General Ellison about this? Because seems to be the hang-up for some gun rights groups and Republicans is the ex parte part of the red flag law. In states where Republicans have backed it, I understand that there is no ex parte provision, which is to say that the guns can be confiscated without a due process hearing, is the argument made. Can you comment on that and why you think that that's essential, and if it were removed, is the integrity of the bill still there?
Well, sometimes time is of the essence. You don't have a long time to go gather up all the parties. You just got to say, look, we believe that there's going to be an imminent use, a fatal use potentially with a gun, and we got to get in there, and we got to get in there now. Now, again, I think that the ex parte provisions are rare in law. They're usually not. They are deliberately rare because our legal system favors all sides being present. But when somebody is threatening or somebody's life is at risk, there's been, then I think that it's just appropriate. But I will say this, as I said, I don't have a vote. I used to be a legislator, now I'm not. I would say that it's more important to make progress than to get 100% of everything you want. And that would be my message to my friends in the legislature.
Can I ask another topic for Attorney General?
No, but I'll be happy to answer it after.
So part of the pushback from the gun rights groups is that none of the mass shootings match the circumstances that would be covered by these two pieces of legislation. What do you say when you hear that?
Yeah, so I can speak to that a little bit. So statistics show us that in over 70% of mass shootings, at least one of the firearms was obtained legally, right? So that's something that criminal background checks can help us with. That's also something that extreme risk protection orders can help us with. When someone is demonstrating that they are a risk to others, then an extreme risk protection order will help us get that firearm out of legally obtained hands while there's still enough time and space between that person in crisis and the actual act of violence. Evidence from California shows us that in California, their extreme risk protection order was effective in preventing numerous mass shootings.
And also, we're not only trying to stop mass shootings. Yeah. We're also trying to stop suicides. We're also trying to prevent beefs that get deadly out on the street. There's a lot, so the thing is, people die in a number of ways when it comes to gun violence. Yeah. And some people think, oh, well, something happened in North Minneapolis or in Chicago, that's young black men fighting each other. Well, that's part of the problem. But what about mass shootings with some other young man showing up or woman showing up at a school? Or what about somebody shooting themselves? Or what about, there's a range of ways that we lose lives as a result of gun violence. The point that you made earlier is that nobody's immune from this. Right. It may come at you in different ways depending upon who you are and where you are, but it's coming at you. And we're trying to stop it, and we need a comprehensive approach. Sorry to keep on talking.
No, thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions? All right, folks, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, well, I'll call.
This is the last time I'm right here.
You don't want to go on as a delay. And your child was killed I'm so sorry.
Excuse me, guys.
Now what are we doing?
They want to talk abortion pills, so just going to take 1 second to do that. Sorry about that. So
I'll just grab you.
I'm totally not ready for this.
Well, it's just right in opposition, but is
Right.
there any, I guess, recourse or response that Minnesota would or could have if the ruling stands, or because it's a federal ruling, there's nothing, like, let's say the Texas judge's ruling does stand?
In the Minnesota Attorney General's office, we never, ever say there's nothing we can do. There's always something we can do. We just don't know what it is yet. And we believe that a woman has a right to choose. We believe that this drug has got decades worth of use, and it's a legitimate, good drug and ought to be available. Believe this is a highly ideological decision, and there's a competing decision out of Washington State, as you know. And so, yeah, we've joined the opposition to this. It needs to be appealed. We're so glad that the Biden administration's appealing it. It's a basic issue of individual liberty and personal autonomy. And, you know, we understand that some people are opposed to that, but we're in favor of it. So we will stand up for a woman's right to choose and for people to make their own choices about their reproduction.
What has your guidance been to providers following the Washington decision? Are they still sort of in the clear legally in offering this stuff?
Well, you know, I got to be honest with you. Given the dueling decisions that way, we don't have tons of clarity. I can tell you that my staff is working on it now, and we'll issue something as soon as we can to give people as much clarity as we can. But I just think that in all candor, given the current state of this legal dispute, we're still trying to figure it out.
So when you say you joined the appeal, does it mean you're filing an amicus brief or something on behalf of?
No, you know, a bunch of states are fighting this decision and joining to in opposition. So yeah, we're part of that.
Does it obviously concern you, or just Governor Walz talked about it yesterday when he was out and about, finding that particular judge to get that particular decision? I mean, is in terms of the sanctity, or if there is, of the courts, has it become more and more?
This is the most brazen use of judge shopping that I've ever seen. They just go straight through this one guy to get all the decisions that they want to interfere and undermine people's rights. And there's got to be something wrong with that. And so, yeah, I'm very concerned about it. So I'm getting out of my depth. I need to study up with my team. And, you know, I'm always going to be candid with y'all. And so thank you for being patient. But I'll know a lot more by this afternoon. Thanks a lot.